The night was suffocating. Naruto Uzumaki jolted awake in his small apartment, gasping as if he'd been drowning. His thin blanket was soaked through with sweat, clinging to his small frame like a second skin. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m., the same time as every night this week. He sat up slowly, his 9-year-old body trembling, though he couldn't quite understand why. The dream had been so vivid, so real. It started the same way it always did. He was older, stronger, and standing atop a towering structure that seemed to touch the clouds. The landscape stretched endlessly beneath him, a patchwork of forests and rivers and villages. But everything was burning. Smoke rose in thick pillars from multiple directions, and the sky above was an unnatural shade of red, not from sunrise or sunset, but from something far more sinister. He could feel the power coursing through his veins in those dreams, immense and terrible and intoxicating. It was nothing like the clumsy, untamed chakra that occasionally flared up during his fights at school or when he pushed himself too hard during training. This power was refined, controlled, and ancient. It moved through him like water finding its path, finding the weaknesses in everything around it, seeking to exploit and destroy. In the dream, there were enemies. Countless of them. But they weren't faceless shadows. They had names, histories, and faces that burned themselves into Naruto's memory even as he woke. Clans, villages, and among them, always, the Leaf Village. His village, though in the dream he felt no connection to it, only contempt and a cold, burning ambition. But the strangest part, the part that made his skin crawl and his heart race even now, was the emotion attached to those dreams. It wasn't the innocent fear of a child experiencing nightmares. It was something deeper, more fundamental. It was regret. Overwhelming, crushing regret mixed with a dark pride that refused to bend. Naruto stumbled out of bed and made his way to the small sink in the corner of his apartment. The water was cold on his face, shocking his system back to full alertness. He looked up at his reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. For just a moment, a fraction of a second, his eyes looked different. The usual bright blue of his irises seemed deeper, darker. There was a flash of something else there, something that didn't belong. But when he blinked and looked again, they were just his normal eyes. The eyes everyone in the village said looked so stupid, so wrong, so empty. Just a light, he told himself, but even he didn't believe it. The dreams had started a week ago, right after his 9th birthday. Before that, his nights had been relatively peaceful, interrupted only by the occasional nightmare about being chased or the normal fears that plagued children. But this week had been different. Every night, without fail, he found himself in those ancient memories, experiencing a life that couldn't possibly be his own. He tried to tell the old man, the third Hokage, about it during one of their occasional meetings. The Hokage was one of the few people in the village who didn't look at him with contempt or fear. He'd smiled kindly and listened patiently while Naruto described the dreams in fragmented, confused sentences. The old man's expression had changed. Just for a moment, his grandfatherly demeanor had slipped, replaced by something that looked almost like shock, maybe even fear. Then he'd smoothed it over with practiced ease and told Naruto that nightmares were normal for growing boys. Nothing to worry about. But the way he'd said it, the way his hands had trembled slightly as he'd given Naruto a treat to send him on his way, it all suggested that the old man was lying. Or at least, not telling him the whole truth. Naruto pulled on his orange jacket. The same orange jacket he wore every day, the one that made him stand out in a crowd, the one that made him an easy target. He didn't know why he wore it. Something about the bright color made him feel less invisible, even if it made him easier to find when the village children decided to gang up on him. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Naruto usually enjoyed this time of day, before the village woke up and the looks began, before the whispers started again. It was his time, when the world felt like it belonged to him alone. But today, even the sunrise felt wrong. The colors seemed too vivid, almost painful to look at. His chakra felt restless beneath his skin, like a caged animal pacing back and forth, desperate to break free. He needed to train hard. Maybe push himself until his body was too exhausted to think, too tired to dream. By the time the academy lessons started, Naruto was running on fumes. He'd spent the last few hours practicing basic training exercises, running through kata until his muscles burned and his lungs felt like they were on fire. It should have been enough to exhaust him, to quiet the strange restlessness that had settled in his bones. It wasn't. His classmates noticed immediately. There was something different about him today, something that made even the most enthusiastic bullies hesitate before approaching him during break. He sat at his usual spot in the corner of the classroom, ignored and dismissive, but there was an intensity to his gaze now that hadn't been there before. When Iruka-sensei called on him to demonstrate a basic academy technique, Naruto stood with an unusual grace. His movements were crisp and precise, nothing like the sloppy, exaggerated motions that usually defined his physical practice. The other children exchanged confused glances. This wasn't right. Naruto was supposed to be a failure, the class troublemaker, the one who could barely master the most basic techniques. Good form, Naruto, Iruka said, sounding genuinely surprised. Your stance has improved. A few of the children tittered at the comment, but their laughter seemed uncertain, as if they were testing the waters to see if mockery was still appropriate. Sasuke Uchiha, who sat in the front row as always, actually turned to look at Naruto with an expression of mild interest. Naruto didn't acknowledge any of it. He simply completed the technique demonstration and returned to his seat, his mind elsewhere. It was during lunch that things escalated. He was eating alone, as usual, sitting beneath one of the large trees in the courtyard. 3 of the older boys from the higher classes had decided that today was a good day to bully the village's most unpopular resident. They'd done this before, dozens of times. The pattern was always the same. They'd surround him, make cruel jokes about his parentage, which they didn't know, his intelligence, which they overestimated in their cruelty, and his future prospects, which they assumed would be as dismal as his present. Usually, Naruto just took it. He'd growl and snap back with insults of his own, maybe throw a punch if they got too physical. It was predictable. It was manageable. It was safe, in a strange way, because it was familiar. Today was different. When the tallest boy grabbed his collar and shoved him against the tree, something in Naruto snapped. Not in the usual way, not in the bright flare of anger and indignation that normally drove his defensive response. This was colder. More calculated. More aware. He moved with a speed that surprised even himself, twisting out of the grip with a fluid motion that felt like muscle memory from a lifetime he'd never lived. Before the boy could process what had happened, Naruto had positioned himself with his back against the tree, a defensible position, and his eyes had shifted to something else entirely. The other 2 boys hesitated, confused by this sudden change in the dynamic. Their friend was on the ground, wheezing from the impact, more shocked than injured. But it was Naruto's eyes that made them freeze. For just a moment, in the dappled sunlight filtering through the tree leaves, his eyes seemed to shift. The blue irises darkened, deepened, and something else seemed to emerge beneath the surface. A pattern, almost like a design being drawn in red ink. The moment passed. Naruto blinked, and his eyes were normal again. But the damage was done. The 3 boys scrambled away from him, their faces pale, unsure of what they'd just seen but absolutely certain that something was wrong. Don't touch me again, Naruto said, his voice calm and quiet, more dangerous than any shout could have been. Next time, I won't stop. He wasn't sure where the words came from. They didn't sound like him. They sounded older, colder, and absolutely certain of their own truth. The boys didn't come back. They found other entertainment for the rest of lunch, casting nervous glances in his direction whenever they thought he wasn't looking. That night, Naruto stood in the tiny bathroom of his apartment, staring at his reflection with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He'd managed to convince himself earlier that the incident at school had been nothing, a trick of the light, an overactive imagination, a moment of stress manifesting in strange ways. But as the day had progressed and the sun had set, he'd begun to sense something else. A wrongness beneath his skin. A presence that wasn't quite his own but was undeniably becoming more integrated with each passing hour. The strange restlessness had evolved into something more like pressure. His chakra, normally a vague sensation of energy that he could barely sense or control, had become almost tangible. It pressed against the inside of his skin like it was trying to get out, like it was searching for a way to express itself. Around 7 o'clock, he'd felt the first real wave of pain. It had started in his eyes, a sharp, burning sensation that made him gasp and clutch at his face. He locked himself in the bathroom, not wanting any passers-by to see him in distress. Now, several hours later, the pain had subsided to a dull ache, but the sensation of transformation remained. "Just look," he whispered to himself, like a challenge or a prayer. His hands were shaking as he stepped up to the mirror. The bathroom light was dim, powered by the same weak chakra stone that lit most of the village's lower-class residences, but it was enough to see his reflection clearly. And that's when he saw it. His eyes were changing. The blue was still there, still the dominant color, but it was being overtaken from within. Red was bleeding into the white sclera, a deep, crimson red that looked almost like blood staining the whites of his eyes. And in the center, where his pupils should have been, something else was forming, a pattern. A design of some kind, intricate and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. "No, no, no," Naruto breathed, pressing his face closer to the mirror. This can't." His eyes flickered. The red receded slightly, and for a moment they were blue again. But the effort of suppressing whatever was happening cost him. His vision swam, and he had to grab the edge of the sink to keep from falling. When he looked up again, the red was back, more insistent than before. His mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of what was happening. He'd heard stories, of course. Every child in the village learned about the great clans, about the special bloodlines that granted their wielders incredible power. The Hyuga clan with their Byakugan. The Inuzuka clan with their partnership with ninja dogs. And most famous of all, at least to Naruto, the Uchiha clan with their legendary Sharingan. The eyes that could copy any jutsu, that could control minds, that had made the Uchiha one of the most powerful clans in the history of shinobi. The Uchiha clan didn't exist anymore. They'd been destroyed, killed in a single night by one of their own. The story was taught in the academy, and it was one of the few times he'd seen even Irika-sensei look truly sad. The last surviving member was Sasuke, who'd transferred into their academy class just this year, and Naruto was nothing like Sasuke. He was an orphan, a foundling, a child with no clan and no name to his back. So how could he possibly be manifesting eyes like the legendary Sharingan? A wave of fear crashed over him, followed immediately by a wave of something else. Something that felt almost like exhilaration. Power. He could feel it now, coiled in his eyes like a living thing, ready to emerge fully if he just let go of his resistance. But even as the seductive promise of that power whispered through his consciousness, something else emerged from the background of his mind. A presence. A vast, ancient presence that had been slumbering beneath his awareness. The Kyubi. The nine-tailed fox. The demon that had attacked the village when Naruto was born, the creature that the fourth Hokage had sealed inside a newborn baby as the village's last, desperate defense. And the Kyubi was afraid. The presence pressed against the seal in Naruto's stomach, not aggressively, but with urgent fear. It was a sensation he'd never experienced before. The Kyubi was a creature of immense power, a being that had nearly destroyed the entire village. And it was afraid of whatever was happening to Naruto's eyes. The realization was almost more terrifying than the transformation itself. Naruto slumped down onto the bathroom floor, his back against the wall, and covered his face with his hands. The red in his eyes faded as his panic overcame everything else, and after a few minutes of measured breathing, he felt something approaching normal again. His eyes were blue once more, though they felt sore and tender, like they'd been bruised from the inside. He sat there in the darkness for a long time, trying to piece together what was happening to him. The dreams had started it. The visions of another life, another identity, another self that wasn't quite him but was becoming more real with each passing night. And now, whatever dormant power had been locked inside him was awakening in response. He needed to talk to someone. The old man? The Hokage? He would know what this meant. He would know how to explain what was happening. But even as the thought formed, Naruto felt a whisper of something else, a caution, a warning that came from somewhere deep inside him, a part of him that was older and more cunning than a 9-year-old orphan had any right to be. Tell him, and they'll put you under observation. They'll fear what you are becoming. And fear makes people dangerous. The thought was so clear, so articulate, so not his own that Naruto gasped and pressed his head against his knees. This was what the dreams meant. This was what the visions were preparing him for. Something inside him, some fundamental part of his being, was fundamentally other. He was changing. Evolving. Becoming something different from what he'd been, and he still didn't know why. It took 3 days before Naruto found himself alone with the Hokage again. The wait was agonizing. His eyes fluctuated between normal and the strange crimson pattern, the transitions becoming more violent as the days progressed. By the 3rd day, he'd learned to suppress the change consciously, like it was a second set of muscles he could flex and relax. The technique was exhausting, requiring his constant attention, but at least it prevented the other students and his teachers from noticing anything else wrong. The Hokage summoned him on the pretext of a routine check-in about his academy progress. Sarutobi was a kind man, Naruto had learned over the years, one of the few adults in the village who treated him with something approaching normalcy. But there was sadness in the old man's eyes whenever he looked at Naruto, a weight that spoke of knowledge he wasn't sharing. This time, that weight seemed even heavier. "Come in, Naruto," the Hokage said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. The office was exactly as Naruto remembered it, cluttered with papers and documents, the walls lined with portraits of previous Hokage. The old man had candy as always, which he offered to Naruto with a gentle smile. Naruto sat down, his entire body tense. He practiced how to bring up the dreams, how to describe what was happening to his eyes. But now that he was here, the words seemed to stick in his throat. "You look troubled," Sarutobi observed, leaning back in his chair. "Is something bothering you at the academy?" "The dreams," Naruto blurted out, unable to stop himself any longer. "The ones I told you about last week, they're getting worse. And my eyes, something's wrong with my eyes." The Hokage's expression changed immediately. The gentle grandfatherly persona slipped away for just a moment, revealing something beneath, alarm, certainly, but also something that looked almost like confirmation. "Show me," he said quietly. Naruto hesitated, then took a deep breath and let go of the careful control he'd been maintaining. He let the transformation happen, feeling his eyes shift and change, the red flooding in, the pattern, the design, blooming into full existence. The Hokage stood up abruptly, his hand moving to his chin. His gaze was sharp and penetrating, studying Naruto's eyes with an intensity that made the boy feel like he was being dissected. "A Sharingan," Sarutobi whispered. "I thought, but no, that shouldn't be possible. The seals should have prevented." He stopped himself, but it was too late. Naruto had already caught the implication. "The seal?" Naruto asked, his voice shaking. "You mean the seal on the Kyuubi?" Sarutobi moved around his desk and placed a gentle hand on Naruto's shoulder. The touch was warm, reassuring, but it couldn't quite dispel the sense that something fundamental had just shifted between them. "Naruto, there are many things about your past that you aren't old enough to understand yet. Things that are complicated and painful, and things that I've kept hidden to protect you. But it seems your development has forced my hand earlier than I would have preferred. Just tell me," Naruto said, forcing himself to meet the old man's eyes. "Please," the Hokage sighed deeply, the weight of years settling visibly onto his shoulders. He moved to the window and gazed out over the village, his hands clasped behind his back. "You were born during the attack on the village, the night the nine-tailed fox was sealed," Sarutobi began. "Your father was a great man, Naruto. One of the finest shinobi this village has ever known. And your mother, she was remarkable as well. When the Kyuubi attacked, your father made a sacrifice to protect you and this village. He used the forbidden sealing jutsu to contain the Kyuubi within a newborn infant." "Within me," Naruto said flatly. It wasn't really a question. "Yes. Within you." The sealing process was unusual. The way it was performed had unexpected side effects. It was designed to suppress and contain the Kyuubi's chakra, but in doing so, it created echoes, resonances within your system that we didn't fully understand at the time. Naruto let go of his eye transformation, returning them to their normal blue. He felt sick, like the world was tilting at an angle he couldn't quite compensate for. "What kind of echoes?" he asked quietly. Sarutobi turned back to face him. "The seal was created using the principles of reincarnation. A spiritual binding that was supposed to link you to the QB in such a way that your will would gradually dominate its consciousness, creating eventual harmony between vessel and monster. But there were complications. Your chakra signature was unusual even before the sealing. There was something else latent within your system, something ancient and powerful that shouldn't have been there. The old man paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, and Naruto felt his chest tighten with anticipation and dread. We believe that you are the reincarnation of a powerful shinobi from the past, Sarutobi continued. Someone whose chakra and spiritual essence is attempting to resurface within your body as you grow older, and your own power develops. The Sharingan manifestation is a sign that those aspects of your past identity are becoming more active. Naruto's mind reeled. Reincarnation. Past lives. Ancient power. It sounded like fantasy, like the kind of story that Jiraiya would tell when he was drunk on sake. Who? Naruto whispered. Who was I? In my past life? The Hokage looked away, and that was answer enough. I need more time to confirm my suspicions, Sarutobi said carefully. The implications are significant. For now, you cannot tell anyone about your Sharingan. Not your classmates, not your teachers, no one. Do you understand me, Naruto? This must be kept absolutely secret. But why? If I'm supposed to be the reincarnation of some powerful shinobi, wouldn't that make me important? Wouldn't that change how people see me? Yes, Sarutobi said grimly. It would change how people see you. But not necessarily in a positive way. There are secrets here, Naruto, dangerous secrets tied to the history of this village. Secrets about war and pain and loss. If the wrong people discovered what you are, if they learned about your potential power, you could become a target. Or worse, you could become a weapon in someone else's hands. The old man returned to his desk and pulled out a blank piece of paper and a brush. For now, I'm assigning Kakashi Hatake as your private tutor. He's a skilled shinobi, and more importantly, he's trustworthy. You'll meet with him in the evenings, away from the village. You'll begin learning to control your Sharingan and to stabilize your chakra system. But above all, you must act normal. You must blend in. Can you do that? Naruto nodded slowly, even as doubt and fear coiled in his stomach like serpents. One more thing, the Hokage said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Kyuubi's fear that I sense in your reports. Pay attention to that. The beast inside you knows something that we don't. It reacts to your potential power with terror, and that tells me that whatever you're becoming, it surpasses even the nine-tailed fox. That's both a blessing and a curse, Naruto. Such power demands responsibility. As Naruto left the Hokage's office later that evening, his mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears and a strange, intoxicating sense of purpose that he didn't quite understand. The old man had told him very little, had answered almost none of his questions directly. But he'd confirmed enough to reshape Naruto's entire understanding of his own existence. He was more than an orphan. He was more than a jailer for a demon. He was a vessel for an ancient consciousness that was slowly awakening within him, bringing with it power and knowledge and a cold, calculating intellect that felt alien to everything he'd known about himself until now. And as he walked through the darkening streets of the village, Naruto found that he wasn't frightened by that prospect. Instead, he felt something that was perilously close to excitement. That night, as Naruto meditated in his apartment, he felt the Kyuubi's presence more clearly than ever before. The great beast was pacing within the seal, its massive form moving back and forth in agitation. Naruto had felt it before, mostly as a vague pressure behind his navel, an awareness of something vast and ancient imprisoned within him. But tonight the separation between them felt thinner, more permeable. It's waking up, the Kyuubi's thoughts came to him, not in words exactly, but in concepts and emotions that Naruto's mind translated into language. The power that sleeps beneath you. The presence that was old when I was young. Who is it? Naruto asked aloud, not bothering to keep his voice down. There was no one in the building to hear him. The other residents kept their distance from the demon vessel. I do not know its name in the language you speak, the Kyuubi replied. But I know its power. I felt it once, centuries ago, when the world was different and the great shinobi clans were still rising to prominence. A creature of strategy and ambition. A master of the eye techniques. A being that unified through strength. The Kyuubi's form pressed against the seal, and Naruto caught a flash of the creature's fear. Genuine, profound fear that a being of the nine-tailed fox's power could feel something more powerful than itself. It is dangerous, the beast continued. More dangerous than I am. I destroyed a village in my madness. But that being, it destroyed clans. It reshaped the world according to its vision, and if it fully awakens within you... The thought trailed off, but Naruto understood the implication. If whatever consciousness slumbered within him awakened completely, there would be nothing in the known world that could stop it. The Hokage said you'd be afraid, Naruto said, testing the thought. Why? You're supposed to be the strongest creature in the world. Strength means nothing against an enemy that understands you completely, the Kyuubi said, and there was something almost like respect in the concept. That is what you will become, if you follow the path laid out before you. An enemy that comprehends all strategies, that adapts to all tactics, that sees 3 moves ahead in every direction. An enemy that cannot be defeated because it cannot be surprised. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. The way the Kyuubi described it, the awakening consciousness sounded less like a power and more like a fundamental reorganization of his being into something cold and perfect, and utterly inhuman. But I don't want to be like that, Naruto said. I want to be strong, yes. I want people to stop looking at me like I'm a freak. But I don't want to lose myself in the process. That may not be a choice, the Kyuubi said quietly. The being that dwells within you was not kind. It was not merciful. It understood power and ambition and nothing else. As it awakens, it will teach you to see the world as it did. And seeing the world that way, it changes you. It makes you into something that cannot unmake itself. The presence of the Kyuubi withdrew slightly, and Naruto could sense the creature settling back into its corner of the seal, exhausted by the effort of communication. But as he drifted towards sleep, Naruto found himself thinking about the Hokage's words and the Kyuubi's warnings. Something ancient was awakening inside him, a consciousness that had existed before this life, before this body, before he'd been born as Naruto Uzumaki. And it was bringing with it power, yes. But also hunger. Also ambition. Also a way of seeing the world that was colder and more calculated than anything a 9-year-old orphan could have imagined. The question wasn't whether he could stop it from awakening. The Hokage had already made clear that the process was inevitable. The question was whether, once it had fully awakened, there would be anything left of the simple, stubborn, lonely boy who wanted nothing more than to be acknowledged by his village. As sleep finally claimed him, Naruto dreamed again. But this time, the dreams were different. This time, he wasn't watching the ancient scenes from the perspective of an outside observer. This time, he was living them. Feeling them. Becoming them. He stood at the top of a great tower, and the world spread out beneath him like a chessboard. And in his mind, with perfect clarity, he understood every piece on that board. Every strength. Every weakness. Every move that could be made and every counter that existed. And in his hand, a power that could reshape reality according to his vision. The dream self smiled, and it was a smile that contained no warmth, no mercy, no humanity. It was the smile of something vast and perfect, and utterly alien. When Naruto woke the next morning, he could still feel that smile on his face. And when he looked in the mirror, his eyes flickered between blue and red like a dying fire, unable to settle on either state. The awakening had begun in earnest, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. 3 days passed in careful normalcy, though normalcy had become a relative concept for Naruto Uzumaki. He attended the academy as usual, submitted to his lessons, and maintained the pretense of being just another troublemaking student struggling with basic techniques. It was easier than he'd expected to wear the mask. There was something almost comforting about the familiar rhythm of being ignored and underestimated. It gave him space to think, to process, to slowly integrate the impossible reality that had been thrust upon him. But beneath the surface, everything was changing. His chakra had become more responsive, more alive. Where before it had been a vague sensation he could barely sense or manipulate, now it flowed through his body with almost purposeful intent. His muscles felt stronger, his reflexes sharper. The world seemed to move slower around him, as if his perception had accelerated to match his growing abilities. And his eyes were the most challenging change to manage. The Sharingan manifested unpredictably, triggered by stress or intense emotion. He'd nearly lost control during a particularly tense moment in Academy history class when Irika-sensei had been discussing the founding of Konoha. The red had started bleeding into his vision, and the temper pupils had begun to form before Naruto had managed to suppress it through sheer force of will. No one had noticed, they never did, because no one was paying attention to him, but the close call had shaken him. By the third evening, he was desperately looking forward to his first session with Kakashi. The Jonin had sent word through the Hokage's office that he would meet Naruto at the edge of the training grounds outside the village, far from prying eyes. Naruto had spent the afternoon in a state of nervous anticipation, imagining what the famous copy ninja would think of his situation. Kakashi Hatake was a legend in the academy, a prodigy who'd become a Jonin at an impossibly young age, a warrior whose name was whispered with a mixture of respect and wariness. And now, apparently, the Hokage had trusted him with Naruto's most dangerous secret. The sun was beginning to set when Naruto made his way to the training grounds, moving carefully to avoid being seen by other villagers. The third Hokage's orders had been clear: absolute secrecy. No one could know that the orphan demon vessel was receiving special instruction, much less that he was manifesting a Kekkei Genkai, a bloodline ability that should have been impossible for someone of his parentage. Kakashi was waiting for him near the edge of a small clearing, his signature tall frame silhouetted against the orange sky. He wore his standard Jonin outfit, dark clothes that faded into shadow, a forehead protector positioned lazily over one eye. A thin scar ran down the left side of his face, giving him a somewhat dangerous appearance that was somehow undercut by the casual slouch of his posture. When Naruto approached, Kakashi turned to face him, and the boy felt the weight of the Jonin's attention focused entirely upon him. Even with one eye covered, Kakashi's gaze was piercing, capable of seeing far more than what lay on the surface. "Naruto Uzumaki," Kakashi said, his tone neutral. "The Hokage informed me of your situation. This is unexpected. What exactly did he tell you?" Naruto asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Kakashi tilted his head slightly. "That you've begun to manifest a Sharingan. That you're experiencing dreams and visions that suggest you might be a reincarnation of a significant shinobi from the past, and that the manifestation of these abilities coincided with a reaction from the Kyuubi that warranted immediate intervention." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "He also told me that if my suspicions about your identity are correct, we're looking at one of the most delicate and dangerous situations the village has faced in decades." Naruto swallowed hard. "You know who I was? In my past life?" "I have a theory," Kakashi said. "But I'd like to confirm it before we discuss specifics." The Hokage was careful not to name names, and for good reason. "If there's even a possibility that you could be who I think you are, then the fewer people who know, the better." He gestured to the center of the clearing. "Come. Show me your Sharingan." Naruto took a breath and let go of the careful control he'd been maintaining. It was easier now, more natural. The transformation swept across his eyes like a wave, the blue irises darkening, the red flooding in. The design bloomed, 3 black tomo arranged in a circle around the pupil, like a pinwheel caught in the moment of rotation. Kakashi's entire body went rigid. It was only for a moment, a fraction of a second before he regained his composure. But Naruto caught it, the shock, the recognition, and beneath those, a flicker of something that might have been fear. "The Sharingan," Kakashi said quietly, moving closer to examine Naruto's eyes. "But it's not like any Sharingan I've ever seen. The Tomi are different. More formed. More perfect." "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, letting the transformation fade as Kakashi stepped back. "Normally, a Sharingan manifests gradually. The user starts with 1 Tomi in each eye and gains more as they develop and experience trauma. But yours appeared fully formed, with all 3 Tomi present immediately. That shouldn't be possible unless..." Kakashi trailed off, and Naruto could almost see the wheels turning behind his one visible eye. "Unless what?" Naruto pressed. "Unless your Sharingan isn't new," Kakashi said slowly. "Unless it's an old one. One that's been dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken." He studied Naruto with renewed intensity. "The Hokage suspects you're the reincarnation of someone specific, doesn't he?" someone important to the history of this village. Naruto hesitated. The Hokage hadn't explicitly told him that he could discuss this with Kakashi, but it seemed obvious that the Jonin would need to know if he was going to help Naruto control his abilities. He wouldn't tell me directly, Naruto admitted. He said he needed more time to confirm his suspicions. But he implied that I was someone significant. Someone from a long time ago. Kakashi was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and careful, like he was selecting each word with extreme precision. There is a figure from the founding era of this village, Kakashi said. A man who was involved in the establishment of Konoha, though his role is not well documented in official histories. He was extraordinarily talented, perhaps the most talented shinobi of his generation in some respects. He had the Sharingan. He had an ambition to reshape the world according to his ideals, and eventually, he became something of an antagonist to the village he'd helped create. Naruto's heart was pounding. Who? I can't name him, Kakashi said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone. Not yet. That's the Hokage's decision to make, and he has reasons for his caution. But I can tell you this, if you truly are his reincarnation, then you are potentially one of the most powerful shinobi this village has ever produced. And also one of the most dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Naruto asked. To everyone, Kakashi said flatly. To the village. To yourself. To the concept of peace that the Hokage and others have worked to build. He paused, and his tone softened slightly. But you have an advantage that your past life didn't have. You have the opportunity to choose a different path. You have people around you who can guide you toward making the right choices, rather than the powerful ones. Naruto wanted to ask more questions, but Kakashi had already moved on, gesturing for him to take a position in the center of the clearing. We're going to start with the basics, Kakashi said. Control and stabilization. Your Sharingan is manifesting, which is good, but you're fighting it, suppressing it, trying to deny it rather than integrate it. That resistance is causing stress on your chakra system. Over time, it could cause serious damage. We need to teach you to embrace the power while maintaining your own sense of self. How do we do that? Naruto asked. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in what might have been a smile. The same way we do everything in shinobi training. Practice, discipline, and a willingness to push yourself past the point where it hurts. Over the next 2 weeks, Naruto's life became bifurcated in a way he never experienced before. By day, he was still the village's least favorite student, the orphan troublemaker who barely passed his courses and spent more time clowning around than studying. He maintained the facade with surprising ease, though he found himself increasingly conscious of the performance aspect of it. He was playing a role, he realized, performing the part of a weak, pathetic child while something far more formidable grew beneath the surface. By evening, he was something else entirely. Kakashi's training was unlike anything Naruto had ever experienced. The Jonin pushed him relentlessly, but with a precision that suggested he had a very specific goal in mind. They worked on controlling the Sharingan's activation and deactivation, practicing the transition from his normal vision to the Kekkei Genkai over and over again until the process became smooth and automatic. It was harder than it sounded. The Sharingan doesn't just change your eyes, Kakashi explained during one session, after Naruto had failed the activation sequence for the 15th time in a row. It changes your entire visual perception. It processes information faster than normal human eyes. It can perceive chakra. It can see through certain illusions. When you activate it, you're essentially switching from one mode of perception to another. If you do it wrong, if you fight the transition, it causes a feedback loop in your brain that's genuinely painful. Then how am I supposed to do it right? Naruto asked, rubbing his temples where a dull ache had settled. By accepting it, Kakashi said. By stopping your resistance and letting the transformation happen naturally. The Sharingan is part of you now, maybe not in the way you choose, but it's there. Fighting it only makes things harder. Naruto tried again, this time focusing on acceptance rather than control. He visualized the transformation not as something he was forcing to happen, but as something he was permitting. He imagined the Sharingan activation not as a battle between his normal self and his awakening power, but as a conversation between the two. The transition was smooth. Natural. Almost easy. And suddenly his entire world exploded into detail. His normal vision was replaced by something incomprehensibly complex. He could see individual leaves on the trees 100 yards away. The chakra in his own body became visible, a network of glowing lines running through his form, bright with life and power. And beyond his body, he could sense chakra in the environment itself, leftover traces of Kakashi's movements and training. It was overwhelming. Good, Kakashi said, his voice sounding distant and distorted through the overwhelm of new sensory input. Now maintain it. Feel the power. Accept it. Don't fight it. Naruto gritted his teeth and focused on breathing, on simply existing in this new state of perception without panicking. Slowly, his mind adapted. The chaos of new information reorganized itself into patterns he could understand. His heart rate stabilized. Excellent, Kakashi said. Now deactivate. Naruto pulled back from the Sharingan, feeling the transformation reverse. The explosion of detail faded, and his vision returned to normal. It felt somehow diminished now, limited and crude compared to what he just experienced. How do you do that? Naruto asked, breathing heavily. That had to take years to master. Normally, yes, Kakashi agreed. But you're progressing faster than I would have anticipated. There's something in you that remembers how to use the Sharingan instinctively. It's like your muscle memory is decades old. The comment sent a chill down Naruto's spine, because he knew what Kakashi was implying. The consciousness sleeping within him, the past life that was gradually awakening, it carried with it experience and knowledge that transcended normal learning. Over the following weeks, they expanded the training. Kakashi taught Naruto how to use his enhanced visual perception in combat, how to predict movements by analyzing chakra flow, how to identify weaknesses in an opponent's stance before they even knew they were vulnerable. It was nothing like the sloppy, emotional fighting that had characterized Naruto's street brawls. This was precise, elegant, devastating. During a sparring session in the third week, Naruto caught Kakashi off guard with a maneuver he'd never been explicitly taught. He'd read Kakashi's body language through the Sharingan, predicted where the Jonin would move, and positioned himself to intercept rather than chase. Kakashi had stopped the sparring session immediately. Where did you learn that? The Jonin had asked, not with anger, but with intense curiosity. I didn't, Naruto had replied, confused. I just saw what you were going to do, and responded. Kakashi had been quiet for a long time after that, studying Naruto with an expression that was hard to read. The memories are bleeding through, he'd finally said. The past life consciousness. It's not fully awake, but pieces of its knowledge are surfacing in your instinctive actions. That's going to accelerate the awakening process. Is that bad? Naruto had asked. It's complicated, Kakashi had answered. It's good in that you're learning faster than you should be able to. It's bad because it means the integration process is speeding up in ways we can't necessarily control. By the end of the third week, Naruto's understanding of his situation had evolved significantly. The Hokage had been right. He was the reincarnation of someone important. Someone whose knowledge and abilities were slowly seeping back into his consciousness. Someone whose nature was fundamentally different from the people around him. And Kakashi was both helping him and studying him, Naruto suspected. The Jonin asked detailed questions after each training session. How did the memories feel? Were there patterns to which knowledge surfaces first? Did Naruto feel drawn towards certain types of techniques or philosophies? It was like Kakashi was building a map of the awakening consciousness, trying to understand its nature and extent before it fully emerged. On the evening of the 21st day of private training, the third Hokage summoned both Naruto and Kakashi to his office. Sarutobi looked tired, Naruto thought. More tired than he'd ever seen the old man look before. There were new lines on his face, and his movements seemed heavier, as if he was carrying a burden that had only grown more substantial with the passage of time. Kakashi, thank you for your reports, the Hokage said, gesturing for them both to sit. Your assessment is remarkably thorough, and it aligns with my own findings. Then you've confirmed the identity? Kakashi asked. The Hokage nodded slowly. I've cross-referenced the historical records, the seal specifications, and the nature of the manifestation. The evidence is compelling, though circumstantial in some respects. He turned to face Naruto directly. I owe you the truth, Naruto. The full truth about who you are and what you're becoming. Naruto's mouth went dry. After 3 weeks of dancing around the subject, of hints and implications and careful non-statements, he was finally going to know. Your name is Naruto Uzumaki, the Hokage began. That much I've told you before. You were born during the night the nine-tailed fox attacked our village. Your father was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki, a kunoichi of extraordinary talent. Naruto felt the world shift. The fourth Hokage? His father had been a Hokage? But that didn't make sense. If he'd been the son of a Hokage, how had he ended up alone in an apartment on the outskirts of the village, bullied and despised? On the night of your birth, Sarutobi continued, your father made the decision to seal the nine-tailed fox within you. It was a controversial choice, made in a moment of desperation. The village was falling, and there was no other way to stop the beast. By using the sealing jutsu, he sacrificed his own life and his wife's life to protect you and the village. The Hokage paused, letting that information settle. What you don't know, what very few people know, is that the sealing didn't work quite as expected. The Kyuubi was successfully contained, but your father's sealing technique was flawed in a specific way. It created resonances in your chakra system that awakened something that should have remained dormant. The reincarnation, Naruto said quietly. Yes. You see, Naruto, there is a concept in the shinobi world that is older than most recorded history. It's the belief that particularly powerful shinobi can leave imprints on the world, echoes of their consciousness and ability that sometimes manifest in future generations. It's rare. It's unpredictable, and it's usually so subtle that it goes unnoticed. But in your case, in my case, what? Naruto pressed. In your case, the individual in question was so powerful, and your father's sealing technique created such specific conditions, that the reincarnation imprint became active. Alive. A consciousness seeking to resurface within your being. The Hokage pulled open a drawer in his desk and withdrew a sealed envelope. He set it on the desk between them, and Naruto could see that his own name was written on the envelope in an unfamiliar hand. This is a journal, Sarutobi said. Written by myself in the days following the nine-tailed fox's sealing. I documented everything I understood about your situation, including my theories about your nature. I sealed it away, thinking I would have time to gradually prepare you for this revelation. But it seems your awakening is accelerating faster than I anticipated. He gestured to Kakashi. I've asked Kakashi to be your teacher in part because I trust his judgment, but also because he has experience dealing with the power you're manifesting. He carries within his own body a modified version of the Sharingan. He can understand the weight of carrying a power that isn't entirely your own. Kakashi nodded slightly, and Naruto suddenly understood. Kakashi's Sharingan wasn't a Kekkai Genkai, it was transplanted. Someone had given him the eye, probably during his time as a shinobi, which meant Kakashi understood what it was like to have something foreign become part of your identity. Before we go further, the Hokage said carefully, I need you to understand the gravity of the situation, Naruto. The individual whose consciousness is attempting to awaken within you was extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily ambitious, and extraordinarily dangerous. He was the reason the Uchiha clan fractured. He was responsible for wars and suffering that lasted generations. Then why are you telling me this? Naruto asked. Why not just seal the consciousness away? Keep it dormant? Because it's not possible, the Hokage said simply. The awakening has already begun. Any attempt to seal it further would only cause psychological damage to you both. The consciousness and your own identity would fracture, and you would be left as a broken, fragmented shell. No, the only path forward is integration. You must learn to coexist with this awakening power, to acknowledge it without being consumed by it. How am I supposed to do that? Naruto felt panic rising in his chest. If this thing is as powerful as you're saying, how do I keep from just disappearing? How do I keep being Naruto when there's someone else inside my head who's much stronger than I am? By being deliberately, consciously yourself, Kakashi said, and there was something almost gentle in his tone. By making choices that define you in direct opposition to the choices that consciousness would make. By building relationships and connections that anchor you to your identity. The consciousness that's awakening doesn't understand attachment. It doesn't understand loyalty, or love or sacrifice. If you cultivate those things, if you make them central to who you are, they'll act as a buffer against the awakening power. Naruto wasn't sure he believed that, but he desperately wanted to. I need to know, Naruto said, his voice trembling slightly. I need to know who this consciousness is. I need to know the name of the thing that's waking up inside me. The Hokage and Kakashi exchanged a glance. Then Sarutobi took a breath and spoke. According to the historical records and my own analysis, you are the reincarnation of Madara Uchiha. The name hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water, sending out ripples that seemed to disturb everything around it. Madara Uchiha. One of the founders of the village. The man who nearly destroyed it. The legend whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and revulsion. No, Naruto said, shaking his head. No, that's not possible. I'm not. I can't be him. You're not, the Hokage said firmly. You are Naruto Uzumaki. You were born to Minato and Kushina. You've lived a different life, experienced different things, made different choices, but you carry within you the potential of his power, the echoes of his consciousness. The question is whether you will let those echoes define you, or whether you will forge your own path. Naruto sat in stunned silence. Madara Uchiha. The consciousness that had been manifesting in his dreams, the power that had been surging through his body, it was the reincarnation of the legendary shinobi. There's one more thing, Kakashi said quietly. Something the Hokage probably hasn't told you yet. Sarutobi nodded, as if granting Kakashi permission. Madara Uchiha was not alone in his power, Kakashi said. He had a rival. Another shinobi of equal or greater strength. Someone whose consciousness is also reincarnated in this era, and according to the teachings of the reincarnation cycle, the two of them are fated to come into contact again. Naruto's head snapped up. What? Who? We're not entirely certain, the Hokage said. But there is a child in your academy class who shows signs of being the reincarnation of Madara's rival. Someone whose growth and development will likely mirror your own. Naruto didn't need to ask who. Somehow, he already knew. Sasuke Uchiha? Naruto left the Hokage's office in a state of shock that persisted throughout the walk back to his apartment. Madara Uchiha. The consciousness inside him belonged to one of the most legendary, and infamous, shinobi in history. A man whose philosophy of strength and ambition had shaped wars and destroyed clans. A man whose power had been so great that he nearly conquered the world through sheer force of will. And he was waking up. Growing stronger with each passing day. Integrating his ancient consciousness with Naruto's 9-year-old mind. In his apartment, Naruto sat on the edge of his bed and tried to process the implications. The dreams made sense now. The visions he'd been experiencing weren't random. They were memories of Madara's life. The structures he'd seen in his dreams were actual places that Madara had existed in. The power he'd felt in those dreams was the actual power that had once flowed through Madara's body. And the cold, calculating intellect that had been bleeding through his thoughts. That was Madara's way of seeing the world. He had less than a decade of life experience as Naruto Uzumaki. And he was struggling against consciousness that spanned centuries, accumulated power that dwarfed anything he could imagine, and ambitions that extended far beyond a single village, or even a single generation. How was he supposed to resist that? How was a 9-year-old orphan supposed to compete with a legendary shinobi for control of his own mind? He felt something shift in the Kyuubi's cage, an acknowledgement, a confirmation of Naruto's fear. You begin to understand, the 9-tailed fox's thoughts came to him. The weight of what awakens within you. This is not a simple merging of consciousness. This is the return of one of the most powerful beings to ever walk the shinobi world. Why? Naruto asked aloud. Why am I the one this happened to? Why did the Hokage's sealing jutsu activate Madara's reincarnation instead of just containing the Kyuubi? Because your father was brilliant, the Kyuubi said, and there was something almost like respect in the concept. But also because your father did not fully understand the implications of what he was doing. He sealed me inside you as an anchor. A measure to keep me from breaking free. But the sealing process itself created conditions where dormant powers could awaken. It is like opening a lock to guard against one danger while inadvertently opening the door to another. Naruto closed his eyes. His father, the fourth Hokage, had sealed a demon inside him as a baby. And in doing so, he'd activated the reincarnation of one of history's greatest warriors. That was a lot of burden to inherit. He was pulled from his spiraling thoughts by a knock at the door. His body went instantly tense. No one came to his apartment. Ever. Neighbors avoided him deliberately, as if proximity to the demon vessel might somehow corrupt them. Naruto moved to the door and opened it cautiously. Kakashi stood in the hallway, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable behind his mask. "I thought you might benefit from some additional perspective," the Jonin said without preamble. "May I come in?" Naruto stepped aside, and Kakashi entered the cramped apartment with the same casual grace he brought to everything he did. He looked around briefly, taking in the sparse furnishings and general poverty of the living space. But if it bothered him, he gave no sign. "I was like you once," Kakashi said, settling into a chair with practiced ease. "Not exactly. My circumstances were very different, but I received a gift of tremendous power that I didn't ask for and wasn't entirely prepared to handle. A Sharingan from a dying comrade, transplanted into my eye socket in a moment of desperation." He raised his forehead protector slightly, revealing the Sharingan beneath. It was unlike Naruto's natural one. The red was slightly different, the tomi less perfectly formed, but it was unmistakably the same power. "For a long time, I felt like that I didn't belong to me," Kakashi continued. "It was someone else's power, someone else's ability. I was just a vessel. But over time, I realized something important. Power doesn't have an inherent owner. Power is a tool. It can be used differently depending on who wields it. But this is different," Naruto protested. "This isn't just power. This is another consciousness. Another person inside my head." "Is it?" Kakashi asked. "Or is it memories? Knowledge? Instinct?" "Madara Uchiha is dead, Naruto. He has been dead for a very long time. What's awakening in you is not Madara himself, but the echo of what he was, the imprint of his consciousness on the world itself. You have the ability to shape that imprint, to guide it, to use it or discard it as you see fit." "The Hokage said I couldn't resist it," Naruto said. "He said trying to seal it would destroy me." "Resisting is different from guiding," Kakashi said. "Madara's consciousness is awakening because your power is developing and your mind is maturing. Instead of fighting that awakening, accept it, learn from it, and then choose what to do with what you've learned." Kakashi stood, and when he looked at Naruto directly, his visible eye was intense and focused. "You asked me earlier why the Hokage assigned me as your teacher. Beyond the practical reason of training your abilities, it's because I understand the burden of carrying someone else's power, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't define you unless you let it. You are still Naruto Uzumaki. You still have the ability to make your own choices. You still have the ability to forge your own path. The fact that you carry the power of a legendary shinobi doesn't change that. It only means you have more tools at your disposal." Kakashi moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "The academy exams are coming up," he said. "You'll be tested by your peers and your teachers. I expect you to pass those exams in advance. Not by hiding your abilities, but by using them intelligently. Let them see that you're stronger, smarter, more capable than they thought. But do it as Naruto, not as Madara. Do it to prove something to yourself, not to prove something to the world." After Kakashi left, Naruto sat alone in his apartment, turning the Jonin's words over in his mind. Accept it. Guide it. Choose what to do with it. It sounded simple in theory. In practice, it meant learning to coexist with a consciousness that had centuries of experience and overwhelming power. It meant learning to navigate a relationship that could easily become adversarial if he wasn't careful. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the test wasn't whether he could resist Madara's power. It was whether he could integrate it in such a way that it became his own. That night, as he drifted towards sleep, Naruto didn't fight the dreams. Instead, he let them come. He opened himself to the memories of Madara's life, the vast knowledge accumulated across centuries, the cold calculus of power and strategy. And for the first time, he experienced them not as an invader's memories, but as his own. The next week passed in a blur of activity and preparation. Kakashi intensified the training, pushing Naruto through exercises that were specifically designed to prepare him for the academy exams. They worked on taijutsu, hand-to-hand combat, refining the techniques that had been bleeding through from Madara's instinctive knowledge. They practiced chakra control, pushing Naruto to refine and stabilize the massive reserves of power that flowed through his body. And they worked extensively on the Sharingan, learning not just how to activate and deactivate it, but how to use it in combat situations. The Sharingan isn't just about seeing, Kakashi explained during one training session. It's about understanding. When you activate it, you're not just seeing the world differently, you're processing information about chakra flow, about movement patterns, about strategic positioning. The power isn't in the eyes themselves. The power is in the brain's ability to process the information the eyes provide. By the eve of the academy exams, Naruto felt transformed. Not just physically, though his body had certainly changed, becoming more coordinated and powerful, but mentally. He'd spent the last 3 weeks integrating Madara's consciousness, allowing the memories and knowledge to become part of his understanding without letting it overwhelm his own sense of self. He was still Naruto. Still the orphan boy who wanted recognition and connection. But now, he was Naruto with the power to demand both. Naruto with the tools to reshape his world. On the final evening before the exams, he stood once again in the training clearing with Kakashi. The Jonin studied him carefully, and Naruto could see something like approval in his expression. "You've progressed remarkably," Kakashi said. "Better than I would have anticipated. The integration seems to be proceeding smoothly. You're maintaining your sense of self while accepting the power you've been given. Am I ready?" Naruto asked. "You're ready for the exams," Kakashi said. "As for being ready for what comes after, no one is ever truly ready for that. But you're prepared to adapt and overcome, which is the best preparation any shinobi can have." Kakashi pulled out a small scroll and handed it to Naruto. "This is a list of meditation techniques that will help you maintain balance as the Madara consciousness continues to awaken. Practice them regularly. And Naruto, remember that power is a tool, not a destination. The goal isn't to become the strongest shinobi alive. The goal is to become the shinobi you choose to be." The exam day arrived with summer heat and bright sunshine. Naruto stood before the academy, dressed in his usual orange jacket, and felt the strange duality of his existence settle over him like a cloak. To the teachers and students, he was still the failure, the troublemaker, the demon vessel whose only value was as a walking prison for a sealed monster. But beneath that appearance, something far greater was growing. A power that would soon become impossible to hide. A consciousness that was awakening like a predator opening its eyes after centuries of slumber. And for the first time since his awakening began, Naruto didn't feel fear about that prospect. He felt ready. As he entered the academy building, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the seal on his stomach, the prison that contained both the Kyuubi and the echoes of Madara Uchiha, Naruto made a silent promise to himself. He would accept the power. He would learn from the consciousness. But he would never let either one define him completely. He would forge his own path, using the tools he'd been given to create something that was uniquely his own. Madara Uchiha had sought to reshape the world through the application of overwhelming force. Naruto Uzumaki intended to do something more complex. He intended to prove that there was more than one way to change the world. And he intended to do it by being more than just a reincarnation, more than just a vessel for ancient power. He intended to be himself. The academy doors closed behind him as he entered the examination hall, and the next chapter of his life began in earnest. The academy examination room was smaller than Naruto had expected. 23 students stood in rows before Iruka-sensei, each one displaying the nervous energy that came with knowing their futures hung in the balance. The written exam came first, basic questions about jutsu theory, village history, and shinobi protocol. It was the kind of test that Naruto would normally have failed spectacularly, filling in random answers and amusing himself by drawing pictures of ramen in the margins. But Naruto was not the same person who would have taken this test a month ago. He read each question with methodical precision, analyzing the language for tricks and misdirection. The knowledge came easily, not from his 9 years as Naruto Uzumaki, but from centuries of accumulated understanding flowing up from the depths of Madara's consciousness. He understood the theory behind the jutsu because that consciousness had created many of the foundational jutsu that modern shinobi still used. He knew the village history because his past self had lived much of that history. When Iruka collected the papers at the end of the hour, Naruto caught a glimpse of his own exam. Every answer was correct. The handwriting was neat and precise. The work showed not just knowledge but understanding. Iruka's expression when he looked at the paper was one of pure shock. The practical portion of the exam came next. Each student was called up individually to demonstrate 3 basic academy techniques: the clone jutsu, the substitution jutsu, and the henge transformation. These were fundamental techniques, the kind that even the weakest academy graduates were expected to master. Naruto had spent exactly 0 hours practicing them before his awakening. Now, as he stood in the testing area facing Iruka and 2 other academy instructors, he completed all 3 with flawless execution. The clone jutsu produced perfectly formed clones that held stable for a full 3 minutes without flickering or dispersing. The substitution jutsu was so fast and clean that it was difficult to see the actual moment of the switch, and the henge transformation was so detailed and controlled that for a moment, one of the instructors actually believed Naruto had become someone else entirely. "Excellent work, Naruto," Iruka said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. "Your chakra control has improved dramatically." "How is this possible?" Naruto shrugged, maintaining his carefully constructed facade of casual indifference. "I've been training harder," he said simply. "Figured I might as well pass the exam on my first try." Iruka exchanged meaningful looks with the other instructors, but none of them commented further. The grading rubric was objective enough that they couldn't fail Naruto even if they wanted to. His performance was objectively superior to the vast majority of his classmates. By the end of the examination period, it was clear that Naruto had not only passed but had scored exceptionally well. The results would be posted in 3 days, during the official academy graduation ceremony. As the students filed out of the examination room, Naruto felt the weight of countless stares on his back. His classmates were confused. They'd spent the last 4 years watching Naruto stumble his way through lessons and fail basic tests. They'd grown accustomed to his incompetence, had built a social hierarchy that placed him firmly at the bottom. And now, in a single examination, he'd shattered that carefully constructed understanding of the world. Sasuke Uchiha caught him at the edge of the academy grounds. The Uchiha prodigy stood with his arms crossed, his dark eyes fixed on Naruto with an intensity that suggested he was analyzing something. When Naruto tried to walk past him, Sasuke stepped into his path. "Your technique," Sasuke said without preamble. "It's different. Where did you learn it?" "Train harder," Naruto repeated, using the same casual tone he'd used with Iruka. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me. I can tell when someone's lying. Your movements contain techniques that shouldn't be in an academy student's arsenal. Where did you really learn them?" For a moment, Naruto was tempted to tell him the truth. There was something almost like recognition in Sasuke's gaze, as if the Uchiha prodigy sensed something familiar in the power that Naruto was now wielding. And if Kakashi was right, if Sasuke was truly the reincarnation of Madara's ancient rival, then perhaps on some level they were meant to understand each other. But caution won out. "It doesn't matter where I learned them," Naruto said, meeting Sasuke's eyes without flinching. "What matters is that I learned them, and now I'm just as good as you are. Maybe better." It was a calculated challenge. Exactly the kind of thing that would provoke Sasuke's pride and distract him from asking further questions. It worked. Sasuke's expression hardened, and his hand moved unconsciously toward the kunai pouch at his waist. "You're not better than me," Sasuke said coldly. "You never will be. Your test scores don't change the fact that you're still a dobe, a nobody from nowhere with nothing. I am an Uchiha. My power is born of blood and heritage. Yours is..." He paused, searching for words. "I don't know what yours is, but it's not real." There was something almost desperate in that last statement, as if Sasuke needed to believe it to maintain his sense of superiority. "Believe what you want," Naruto said, and turned to walk away. "Doesn't change the fact that I scored higher on the written exam." He didn't wait to see Sasuke's reaction, but he could feel the Uchiha stare burning into his back as he left the academy grounds. That evening, at his apartment, Naruto sat alone and allowed himself to feel the complex tangle of emotions that he'd been suppressing all day. There was triumph, certainly. He'd proven himself capable, had shown his classmates and teachers that they'd been wrong about him. For years, they treated him as if he was worthless, as if the best he could hope for was to wash out of the academy and spend his life doing menial labor for the village. But now, having scored better than most of them, having demonstrated technical proficiency that rivaled even the best academy students, he'd forced a reckoning with their assumptions. Beneath the triumph, however, there was something else. Something colder and darker. A satisfaction that went beyond merely proving his worth. It was the satisfaction of seeing their shock, of watching them process the fact that the worthless orphan had suddenly become something they couldn't dismiss or ignore. And that satisfaction, Naruto realized with some discomfort, didn't entirely belong to him. It belonged to Madara. You did well. Madara's consciousness came to him through the veil that separated their minds. The thought carried with it a sense of approval that was strangely paternal. They underestimated you. That will make it easier when you move against them. I'm not moving against anyone, Naruto said aloud, speaking to the consciousness as if it were a separate entity, which it was, even as they shared the same mind. I'm just living my life and training to be a better shinobi. Training is one form of preparation for conflict, Madara responded. All shinobi training is, ultimately, a rehearsal for the moment when you must demonstrate your superiority over your enemies. Today, you demonstrated that you are superior to your academy peers. That is the first step toward establishing dominance. Naruto pulled away from the conversation, suppressing the consciousness back into the depths of his mind where it seemed more manageable. But the sensation of it being there, of another presence coexisting with his own thoughts, was impossible to ignore. This was what Kakashi and the Hokage had warned him about. The gradual integration that might eventually consume him if he wasn't careful. The slow seduction of a power and perspective that was fundamentally alien to his own values. He understood why now. Understanding Madara's perspective, even this small glimpse of it, was seductive in its own way. It presented the world in clean, simple terms. Power and weakness, dominance and submission, strategy and execution. There was a terrible elegance to it, and it was nothing like the way he wanted to understand the world. The next few days were strange. Naruto maintained his facade of casual indifference, but he was acutely aware that everything had changed. Teachers who had previously ignored him now called on him in class, and seemed surprised when he answered correctly. Classmates who had bullied him without consequence suddenly treated him with caution, as if they were reassessing whether he was worth antagonizing. Sakura, who had never paid him any attention before, started watching him during lessons with an expression of confused curiosity. And Sasuke? Sasuke watched him like a predator watches a rival who's encroached on its territory. On the evening before the graduation ceremony, when the official rankings would be announced, Sasuke confronted him again. This time, it was in the training grounds outside the village, a more neutral territory than the academy itself. I want to know, Sasuke said without any preamble. How you got stronger. Who taught you? Why do you care? Naruto asked, genuinely curious. We're both graduating regardless. The rankings don't change anything about our positions. Because something is wrong, Sasuke said, his eyes narrowing. Your power doesn't come from the academy. It doesn't come from anything I can recognize. And yet, when I look at you, I feel something I've never felt before. Naruto's attention sharpened. What do you feel? Recognition, Sasuke said flatly. Like I've known you before. Like we're connected in some way that doesn't make sense. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Is it possible that we've met in a previous life or something? That seems stupid, but it's the only explanation that fits what I'm experiencing. Naruto felt a jolt of surprise. Sasuke wasn't supposed to have figured this out. He was supposed to remain unaware, at least for now, of the reincarnation dynamics at play. I don't know what you mean, Naruto said carefully. Yes, you do, Sasuke replied. I can see it in your expression. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to ask you directly, are you harboring something? Some kind of power or consciousness that isn't your own? The question was so direct, so insightful, that Naruto found himself momentarily lost for words. Sasuke was perceptive, He'd always been perceptive, but this level of insight seemed to exceed even his normal capabilities. Unless the reincarnation consciousness within Sasuke was also awakening, providing him with understanding that transcended his normal cognitive capacity. If I were, Naruto said slowly, would that change anything? Would that explain why you're so interested in me all of a sudden? Sasuke was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was strangely vulnerable in a way that contrasted sharply with his usual arrogance. There's something inside me too, he said quietly. Something that wakes up sometimes. It shows me things, teaches me techniques I've never learned. It's been dormant mostly, but lately it's been getting stronger. And when I'm near you, it gets even stronger. Like it's recognizing something familiar in you. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. They stood facing each other in the failing light of dusk, 2 9-year-old boys carrying within them the consciousness of legendary shinobi. We should keep this between us, Naruto said finally. For now. We don't know enough about what's happening to either of us yet. If we start telling people, it'll only create chaos. Sasuke nodded slowly. Agreed. But Naruto? This isn't over. Whatever this is, whatever is happening to us, I need to understand it. And I need to become strong enough to control it, not be controlled by it. So do I, Naruto said. Sasuke turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The way you moved during the exam. The precision. The strategy. It reminds me of something I've felt in dreams. Do you experience that too? Do you dream about things you shouldn't remember? Naruto felt his chest tighten. Yes, he admitted. Every night. I see things that happened long ago. I remember battles and betrayals and a lot of blood. So do I, Sasuke said. And I think I know what we are. I think we're both the reincarnation of shinobi from the founding era. Powerful ones. Ones that mattered. The Hokage told me something similar, Naruto admitted. Sasuke's eyes widened. The Hokage knows? He figured it out after I started manifesting the Sharingan. Understanding flickered across Sasuke's face. So that's how you got stronger. The awakening consciousness brought knowledge and power that your 9-year-old body shouldn't have access to. He paused. If that's true for you, it's true for me too. Which means I need to accelerate my own training. I need to ensure that whatever is waking up inside me doesn't get ahead of my ability to control it. That's probably wise, Naruto agreed. Sasuke studied him for another moment. After graduation, we're going to be assigned to genin teams. I don't know if we'll be on the same team, but I suspect the Hokage will keep us close. And if these consciousnesses inside us are what they appear to be, we're going to have a complicated relationship. Rivals? Naruto asked. More than that, Sasuke said. I think we're supposed to be enemies. Or at least, our past selves were enemies. The question is whether we can forge a different kind of relationship in this life. I'd like to try, Naruto said. Sasuke nodded. So would I. Which is why we should keep training separately for now. We need to establish our own sense of self before we start influencing each other. They parted ways as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Naruto walked back to his apartment with his mind churning. Sasuke had figured out the truth. Or most of it, anyway. And rather than becoming an enemy, he seemed to be approaching the situation with a pragmatism that suggested his own reincarnation consciousness was quite different from Madara's. That meant the situation was more complex than Naruto had anticipated. It meant that the path forward was less certain, less clearly defined. It meant that instead of having one powerful force awakening within him, he had two, his own emerging identity and Madara's consciousness. And now he had to navigate their interaction in the context of his complicated relationship with Sasuke. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The official graduation ceremony took place in the academy's main hall, a large chamber designed to accommodate the village's leadership, academy staff, and the families of graduating students. Naruto sat alone in the audience section, aware that no one had come to watch him graduate. He had no family, no parents, no loved ones who would sit in the stands and cheer when his name was called. The Hokage was present, but he sat with other village leadership, his attention divided among dozens of responsibilities. The announcements were made in order of rank, from highest to lowest. Sasuke was called first, of course. The Uchiha prodigy received a standing ovation from a section of the crowd that Naruto recognized as Sasuke's extended family clan members. There was pride on their faces, but also something that looked almost desperate, as if they were trying to reclaim family honor through Sasuke's accomplishments. Others were called. Sakura placed second, her scores driven primarily by her excellent theoretical knowledge and willingness to study. Several other students followed, each receiving modest applause and congratulations from the academy staff. When Naruto's name was called, ranking third, ahead of several other competent students, the reaction was stunned silence. Iruka announced it with a note of surprise in his voice, as if he still hadn't quite accepted the exam results. Naruto Uzumaki, ranking third. There was a moment of absolute quiet. Then, gradually, scattered applause began. But it was confused applause, the kind that came from people who were processing unexpected information. The village residents who knew about Naruto, the orphan demon vessel, were trying to reconcile that identity with the notion that he'd scored higher than most of his peers. Naruto stood and made his way to the front of the hall to receive his forehead protector. Iruka placed it around his forehead with genuine congratulation in his expression, though there was also something like wariness beneath it. As if the man was reassessing Naruto and finding that his previous understanding of the boy was fundamentally incorrect. As Naruto walked back to his seat, he caught Sasuke watching him with an expression of thoughtful consideration. The Uchiha's consciousness was clearly still processing the implications of Naruto's sudden capability. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the academy courtyard. Parents gathered with their graduating children, offering congratulations and pride. Several of the academy teachers worked the crowd, making small talk and discussing the upcoming team assignments. Naruto stood by himself, watching the interactions with a sense of distance. He was a graduate of the academy now. He was officially a shinobi, albeit a genin, the lowest rank, but he was also fundamentally isolated, existing on the periphery of the celebration because he had no one to celebrate with. It was a familiar feeling, but it felt sharper now. Before, his isolation had come from being dismissed and despised. Now, it came from understanding that he was fundamentally different from these people, these children and their families who had no idea that two reincarnated legendary shinobi had just graduated from their academy. The Hokage found him standing alone near the edge of the courtyard. "Congratulations on your graduation, Naruto," Sarutobi said warmly. "Your performance was remarkable. You should be proud." "Thank you," Naruto replied. "I am proud. But I'm also, I don't know, aware that something is wrong." Sasuke noticed the changes. "He's starting to figure things out." "Yes," the Hokage said, not looking particularly surprised. "I anticipated that Sasuke's development would accelerate once your own awakening began. The two of you are connected at a fundamental level. The emergence of Madara's consciousness in you will call forth a response from whatever dwells within Sasuke." "What does dwell within Sasuke?" Naruto asked. "You said he was the reincarnation of Madara's rival, but you never told me the name." The Hokage glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard, then gestured for Naruto to follow him to a more private area of the courtyard. "The reincarnation cycle in the shinobi world is poorly understood," Sarutobi began. "But there are records that suggest that certain individuals of immense power leave echoes, imprints of consciousness that can resurface in future generations. The most famous such pair are the ones whose consciousness has reincarnated through history in response to each other." He paused, seeming to gather the right words. Madara Uchiha's rival was another powerful shinobi who existed during the founding era of this village. His name was Hashirama Senju. The two of them shaped the early history of this village through their opposition to each other. And according to the records I've studied, their consciousness appears to cycle through reincarnations, with the two of them repeatedly encountering each other across centuries. "Hashirama Senju?" Naruto frowned. "But the Senju clan is basically extinct now. There are only a few members left, and they're not in the academy." "Not to my knowledge," the Hokage agreed. "Which is why I'm uncertain about the identity of the person carrying Hashirama's consciousness in this generation. It's possible that the reincarnation doesn't perfectly align with the clan structure, that the consciousness manifested in someone who isn't technically a Senju by blood." Understanding clicked into place in Naruto's mind. "Sasuke, it's possible," the Hokage said. Sasuke would not be descended from Hashirama. His heritage is purely Uchiha. But reincarnation consciousness doesn't necessarily follow bloodline patterns. It would be ironic, and in keeping with the kind of cosmic humor that seems to govern such things, if Hashirama's consciousness reincarnated into an Uchiha body, particularly into the body of someone from Madara's own clan. Naruto processed this information slowly. So Sasuke might be carrying the consciousness of the person who opposed Madara. Which means we're literally fated to be enemies. Not fated, the Hokage said carefully. That's the importance of reincarnation in a news cycle. While the consciousnesses carry with them ancient enmities and rivalries, the individuals they inhabit are born anew. They have the opportunity to make different choices. The question is whether Sasuke and you will succumb to the patterns of your past selves, or whether you'll forge a new path. Kakashi told me something similar, Naruto said. That the goal is to accept the power but not be consumed by it. Kakashi is wise, the Hokage said. He's lived a life complicated by inherited power and responsibility. His advice is sound. The old man paused. Tomorrow, we'll begin the Genin team assignments. I'm going to assign you and Sasuke to the same team. Why? Naruto asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Because separating you would be foolish. The tension between your emerging consciousnesses will be difficult to manage regardless. But if you're on the same team, it can be channeled productively. You'll have a Jonin leader who understands the situation and can help guide both of you toward integration rather than conflict. Who's the Jonin? Naruto asked. That will be revealed tomorrow, the Hokage said. But I can tell you that he's someone who understands both the weight of inherited power and the importance of forging one's own identity. Someone who can teach you not just how to be a shinobi, but how to be yourself while carrying the burden of being more than yourself. The old man placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his expression unreadable but warm. You've taken your first steps, Naruto. You've graduated from the academy, proven yourself capable, and begun the process of integrating your dual nature. But the difficult work is only beginning. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when the power inside you threatens to overwhelm you, when the weight of your past life becomes too much to bear. In those moments, remember that you have people around you who understand. People who believe in your ability to choose your own path. That night, Naruto found himself unable to sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling of his apartment, and felt Madara's consciousness pressing against the boundaries of his mind. The awakening was accelerating. With the graduation ceremony complete, with Naruto having proven his capabilities to his peers, the consciousness seemed to be becoming more insistent. It showed him visions, not memories of his past life, but possibilities. Scenarios where Naruto continued to grow stronger, accumulated more power, and eventually eclipsed everyone around him in both capability and understanding. In these visions, the village leadership bent to his will because they had no choice. The other shinobi deferred to him because he was demonstrably superior. The weak were separated from the strong, and a new order emerged based purely on power and merit. It was seductive. Naruto understood why Madara had been what he was, why the consciousness within him was what it was. In the world of shinobi, where strength was the ultimate arbitrator of conflict, where the strong preyed upon the weak as a matter of course, the philosophy of absolute meritocracy had a terrible kind of logic to it. But it was also profoundly lonely. In Madara's visions, Naruto was powerful and respected and utterly alone. No one stayed with him because they cared about him. They stayed because they feared him or served him. No one chose him because of who he was. They deferred to him because of what he could do. It was the loneliness of an apex predator in a world of prey, and Naruto realized that he didn't want that. Despite the seductive whispers of Madara's consciousness, despite the appeal of such absolute power and control, he didn't want to end up alone at the top of a hierarchy. He wanted connection. He wanted to matter to people not because of his power, but because of who he was beneath the power. That was the part of himself he needed to protect. That was the anchor Kakashi had told him to build, not through active resistance to Madara's consciousness, but through deliberate cultivation of the aspects of himself that the consciousness couldn't understand or replicate. By the time dawn broke, Naruto had made a decision. He was going to graduate the Genin teams. He was going to become a ninja, to grow stronger, to eventually become so powerful that no one could deny his abilities. But he was going to do it while building genuine connections with the people around him. He was going to prove that strength and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. He was going to show that you could be powerful without being cold, ambitious without being ruthless. It was a different path than Madara's. But it was his path. The classroom was tense the next day. 23 new genin sat in the academy classroom for what they hoped would be the final time, the genin team assignments that would determine their futures. They would be divided into teams of 3, each led by a jonin instructor. Some teams would excel. Some would struggle. And some would wash out entirely, and be sent back to the academy for additional training. Irika stood at the front of the class with a scroll in his hands, reading from it with deliberate slowness. With each name called, 3 students would be assigned to a team number. The jonin instructors would arrive after the assignments were complete to meet their new charges. Team 7, Irika announced, and the class fell quiet, as if everyone could sense this would be significant. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your jonin instructor is Kakashi Hatake. The reaction was immediate. Sakura's face turned red, whether from embarrassment at being paired with Naruto or excitement at being paired with Sasuke. It was difficult to tell. Several other students exchanged glances of confusion, as if they couldn't quite process how the dobe had ended up on a genin team at all, much less on a team with the academy's top-ranked students. Sasuke met Naruto's eyes across the classroom and nodded slightly, an acknowledgement that the Hokage had kept his word about keeping them together. After the rest of the teams were announced, the class dispersed to meet their new jonin instructors in their assigned training grounds. Team 7 was directed to the rooftop of the academy building, where they found Kakashi waiting for them with his characteristic air of casual indifference. "Yo," Kakashi said, raising a hand in greeting. "I'm Kakashi Hatake, your jonin instructor. Before we get started, I'd like to get to know each of you. So let's start with introductions. Tell me your name, your likes, your dislikes, and your dreams for the future. Sakura, you first." Sakura went through a standard introduction, listing her likes and dislikes and explaining that she wanted to become a strong shinobi. When Sasuke's turn came, he was more reserved, speaking only about his goal to revive the Uchiha clan and gain the strength to become an elite shinobi. Then it was Naruto's turn. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice steady. "I like training in ramen. I dislike people who underestimate others based on assumptions rather than observation. And my dream is to become someone that people acknowledge and respect, someone they trust enough to follow into danger." There was something almost too mature in the answer, as if Naruto was speaking from a perspective older than his 9 years. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in what might have been amusement or approval. It was hard to tell with the jonin's face mostly covered by his mask. "Interesting," Kakashi said. "Well, Team 7, I have high expectations for the 3 of you. I can see that you each carry within you potential that exceeds your current capabilities. The question is whether you'll work together to maximize that potential, or whether you'll allow your individual ambitions to fracture the team." He paused, and his tone became more serious. "There are things you don't yet understand about each other. Things that will become clear as we work together. My role as your instructor is to help guide you through that understanding, to teach you not just how to be shinobi, but how to be individuals who can exist as a team despite carrying within you differences that would seem insurmountable to people who don't understand the true nature of the shinobi world." Kakashi looked directly at Naruto and Sasuke as he spoke, and in that gaze was acknowledgement, understanding, and a kind of protective fierceness that suggested Kakashi took his responsibility toward them very seriously. "For now," Kakashi continued, "I want the 3 of you to meet at the training grounds at sunrise tomorrow. We're going to begin your actual shinobi training, and I suspect you'll find it quite different from anything you experienced at the academy." As the team dispersed, Sakura asked Sasuke a question about something he mentioned during his introduction. The Uchiha responded with his characteristic aloofness, and the interaction was the kind of normal student interaction that you'd expect from a genin team. But as Naruto walked toward the stairs, Sasuke fell into step beside him. "He knows," Sasuke said quietly, referring to Kakashi. "He knows everything," Naruto replied. "He's been helping me manage the awakening consciousness for weeks." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Sasuke asked. "Because I didn't know you were experiencing the same thing until you told me," Naruto said. "And I wasn't sure you'd believe me anyway. You're not exactly the type to accept explanations about mystical consciousness awakening without proof. Sasuke considered this, then nodded slightly. Fair. So what do we do now? We train, Naruto said. We grow stronger. And we figure out how to coexist with what's inside us without letting it consume who we are. And if we can't? Sasuke asked. Then we deal with that when it happens, Naruto said. But I think we can. I think that's why the Hokage put us on the same team. He thinks we can help each other balance out. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. Then, the consciousness in me. It's showing me visions of battles. Of wars. Of a time when the world was fundamentally different. And it hates what it's seeing in those visions. It hates the way things turn out. It hates the world we've inherited. Madara's consciousness is showing me something similar, Naruto admitted. It's showing me ways I could reshape the world if I wanted to. Ways I could impose order through strength. And do you want to? Sasuke asked. No, Naruto said. I want to find a better way. I want to prove that there's more to strength than just power over others. So do I, Sasuke said quietly. Which is strange, because my consciousness doesn't. It wants what it wants, and what it wants is a return to something I don't fully understand but desperately wish for. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and Sasuke turned to face Naruto directly. I'm going to get stronger, Sasuke said. Faster than I have been. I need to ensure that whatever is inside me doesn't get ahead of my ability to control it. And I suspect you're going to do the same. Probably, Naruto agreed. Which means we're going to be competing, Sasuke said. Pushing each other. That's fine. That's what teammates do. But Naruto? Don't let the competition turn into hatred. Whatever our past selves were to each other, we're not them. And I'd prefer to keep it that way. So would I, Naruto said. They parted ways, and Naruto walked toward his apartment as the sun began to set over the village. He felt the presence of Madara's consciousness, felt it examining this interaction with analytical precision, trying to understand why Naruto would choose cooperation with a rival when competition might yield faster growth. But Naruto understood something that Madara's ancient consciousness didn't. He understood that the strongest path wasn't always the solitary one. Sometimes, the strongest shinobi were the ones who could form genuine bonds with others, bonds that transcended self-interest and created something greater than the sum of their parts. It was a philosophy that would take years to prove. But Naruto was patient. He had centuries of Madara's knowledge at his disposal. He could afford to be patient, to take the long view, to understand that the victory he was pursuing wasn't just about power. It was about becoming someone worth being.